Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I'm going to begin. If other people join us as we go along, that's fine. And I'm recording this session. I'm Janet and I am Career Mark Manager at Complete Careers. I've been working in education for a very long time and I've been working in career education for almost 20 years. But it's relatively new that I have been working with primary education, and it's been a bit of an eye-opener for me, I have to say, and quite entertaining. I have been very impressed by primary schools and their staff and learners and how they have taken on board the idea of beginning careers work from a much earlier age than has been traditional. And we have an award now that recognises that. And I'm going to introduce you briefly to some of why we think that's important today and a little bit about the beginning of that award. It is a series of 4 webinars, fortnight apart, and we will be looking at all the elements of the award as we go through. But as I say, today I'm just going to give a bit of an introduction, and if there are questions, you can either contact me later. I do have email address at the end, I think. If not, there's the inquiries one, and you can download the presentation at some point if you wish. So, tried to keep it fairly focused today, as I suspect you may not know that much about career learning, and that's where I am very much embedded, career learning and primary education. So why is it important and relevant, and what an award will then ask you to do and what it recognises? And particularly today, we have 4 standards in our award, or elements, or whatever we choose to call them, 4 bits, if you like. And the first bit is measuring the impact on your pupil's development. And I'm going to do a little bit of looking at that later on. So what we actually call our primary award, if you like, or Career Mark Primary, we said that what it's doing is recognising excellence in careers, employability and enterprise. And I'm going to focus most on the first word there, but also employability and enterprise are important, but it's an understanding of what those of us in the careers profession, if you like, mean by that word and what it encompasses. I was originally a secondary teacher and I didn't fully understand what career learning was. And it's only when I moved over into what was the Connections service for a while as a curriculum advisor for career education that I got a better understanding. And it's that I'm hoping I can share with you if you don't already have it. If you do, that's brilliant. And I hope you don't feel you're wasting your time listening to us. So what is career? The Career Development Institute in March of 2017 gave this definition that I've put here: primarily to the sequence and variety of work roles, paid or unpaid, that individuals undertake throughout their lives. It's also the construct which enables individuals to make sense of valued work opportunities and how their work roles relate to their wider life roles. So it's not actually anything that's very simple, and construct is the interesting word there. What is a career? What does career mean? Some people have a job, they would say, others have a career. There is also some suggestion that career is actually your whole life, both work that you're paid for and everything else you do. This is what the CEC, the Careers and Enterprise Company, who were set up not too long ago, have put at the beginning of their section on their website about primary school careers. And I thought this was quite useful to share because it is important. Career-related learning in primary school And if any of you know anything about secondary, it's not exactly the same, I wouldn't say. They're very similar, but career-oriented learning in primary is about broadening pupils' horizons, challenging stereotypes, and helping them develop the skills and sense of self that will enable them to reach their full potential. And I think that's really important. The bit about everybody being empowered, ideally, to reach their full potential. That's what careers is about. It's about helping learners to break down barriers, take ownership, and go for whatever it is they want to go for, if you like. A few more brief definitions here I won't spend a lot of time on, but there you are. Oxford University Press, I won't read these all out, Wikipedia, Cambridge University Press, Collins Dictionary. My first job as a teacher was as an English teacher, and to be perfectly honest, I tried to get the definition of a modern OED, Oxford English Dictionary. That's the one I always swore by. But these days you can't actually access it without paying money easily or subscribing or something. So we'll have to make do with these ones. But it's about what you're doing with your life. I particularly like the Wikipedia one here in some ways because an individual's journey through work and other aspects of life. Now, again, why primary? Some people would say it's far too young to start talking about the job they're going to do. Well, we would say it's never too young. I am familiar with a phrase that I don't know who actually said it originally, but that the Jesuits always used to say, give me a child until they're 7 and I've got them for life. And I think the importance of primary career learning is that the sooner we start to help young people think outside their box, if you like, then the better. And this was a report that I've taken on some headlines from in 2019, the Education Employer Task Force, when they talked about trying to work with youngsters. Because gender stereotyping, particularly in our countries or the Western world, is very set from a young age. I always find it horrifying that it's still pink for little girls and blue for little boys, and quite difficult to find things that are not, or you go and there's a girl's lucky dip and a boy's lucky dip or whatever. So we do gender stereotype from quite young, and although it has changed, there's still a lot of work to do. Also, the fact that between 7 and 17, youngsters don't really learn much about what the country actually needs or what their community needs in terms of a workforce. So that is quite important because, as I've sometimes said to young people, it's all very well if you come from a mining area and a mining background, but there aren't any mines anymore. So unless you want to go off to South Africa or Australia, where you might find a few mines, you're going to have to look for something else to do. So it's what is required in the workforce. What is the local labour market, though it could be national, but it's what are the jobs that need doing that will suit them. That's the other thing. And then the third thing that they picked up on is socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think I was hugely hit by the theory of socioeconomic influence in careers when I finally started to study some of the theory behind careers when I was turned 40. I came from very much working class roots and I ended up as a teacher. Had I come from the middle class roots, I may well now be a solicitor or a barrister, but that didn't happen. And the reason was that my socioeconomic forces were such that my parents said, oh, people like us don't do things like that. So that is a barrier that careers needs to overcome. Families, TV, all these things can affect people. What is acceptable, what isn't, what's good, what suits, etc. So that is why the sooner we start in a way, the better. 2021, and we have the latest report. I haven't yet had time to read it all, but I thought it was worth putting these points down. Why career-related learning matters in primary school. And it's the same really in secondary school, though obviously this is starting earlier. And as an educationalist, I'm hugely in favour of prevention or early intervention rather than late. I did read something this weekend that Boris Johnson is going to put a lot of money into adult education, and that'll be great. Now, it might be quite useful, but if we can get things right the first time round, then there may be less need for the adult education. So, what is it about primary careers that is useful? Why is it good? And it says it, you note the first point, increases motivation and attainment. Now, if that is not what we're hoping education does, then I should never have got into it. If we can help young people to be motivated and to do as well as possible, then that is great. And that is what career learning should help you do. Because it isn't about getting the best exam grades possible. It's about using your education to be able to access the job or the role or the career that you really want to do and that suits you. And it notices that it's particularly picking up disadvantaged children, so supports the idea of social mobility, which is exactly what the next point says. So again, role models who can inspire young people and broaden their horizon, showing them that they don't have to do, if you like, what parents or grandparents have done, that there are other routes and options out there. And I think that that's really important, that education is seen as a key, if you like, to unlock whatever it is you want. At one point, I taught in West Africa, and I always felt secondary youngsters there valued their education more because they saw it as a way to improve and better themselves, whereas not all young people in Britain at the time did. And this is where now we can use careers. So helping them to see all those opportunities, to think about them, to think about who they are, etc. So don't rule career options out, if you like. So what could they do? And they need to find out about things. And again, there's a heck of a lot of learning to be done about all the different jobs there might be, all the different routes. So the sooner you begin, the better. Activities in primary schools, it says, also look at different career education in secondary. The emphasis on in primary is diversity, exploration, and making learning fun. And I think those are really important. Get kids role playing potentially, get them thinking about different things, investigating things, etc., so that they are aware that there is a world of possibilities out there, not that education is something they've just got to put up with until they get to work. So, careers learning in primary. Now, this is now slightly out of date because the CDI has only last month updated their framework, and I will look at that in a minute. But when I first came into the careers world from a teaching background, I think that if you look at the 3 points on this slide, many people think that the careers means only number 2, but in fact, there are 3 key elements to careers. And the first one, if you like, is learning about yourself and developing yourself. Because if you don't know your own strengths, weaknesses, interests, etc., you will have difficulty matching yourself to any particular role that is best suited to you. And I think that our education system, unfortunately, isn't hugely well cut out for self-awareness, because it doesn't encourage people perhaps to think of the things that they're good at that aren't related to sort of traditional academia sometimes. But it is important, therefore. So we want young people to be thinking about who they are, what they want, what their interests, aspirations are. The second one, I'd say, is what I sometimes think people think careers is about: learning about different jobs and the world of work. So what are the jobs and what does being at work mean? Now, again, of course, that has changed dramatically in the last year or so. Many of us have had to change the way we work because of the pandemic and lockdown. People are working more from home, etc. Jobs are changing. Even education, which for a great amount, well, for many, many years in this country was almost always classroom-based only, has had to go online. And it's a huge shift, and we don't know where it's going to take us. We also don't know the jobs that will be coming in the future and the ones that will be disappearing, perhaps. And it's very difficult to predict. But what we do know is that there are no longer the sort of stable jobs for life in many ways that people used to think they got a job and then that was it. So it's important to learn about the careers in the world of work, but also the transferable skills, etc. And then the career management, employability and enterprise. And again, we've come across those before. What is it employers want, need, etc.? And I actually won't be spending too much time on this, but I think it's something to think about because, again, I know academic achievement and being brilliant and clever and all that can be quite useful in a job. But as I sometimes say to youngsters I interview, that's all very well. But if you're not there every day, on time, being reliable, you're not going to be a very good employee. So again, there are things that are very easy to flag up for youngsters who may not be academic that still can potentially make them very employable. Career management as well sounds incredibly highfalutin, I think, in a way. And normally I tend to be talking to secondary teachers because that's where careers has mainly focused in where the work I've done. But even there, year 7, if you like, when they're only 11, will they be needing to manage their career? Well, in my opinion, yes, because what it means is they need to be making sure they're doing the things that will ensure they fulfill their potential. Because if they don't do the best they can, then they are closing down career options. So even in primary school, if you don't try your best to be good at the things you're asked to try and be good at, then you are beginning to shut down opportunities and pathways. And career management is about finding out where you are in a journey, if you like. So where am I now? What am I good at or what am I not good at? What do I like? What don't I like? And then trying to move yourself forward to whatever your dream might be. And it's all about, therefore, small steps going in the direction you want to. For example, I've talked to Year 7 pupils who tell me they want to be a professional footballer. Now, we know not many people will end up as professional footballers, probably from those who want to. But one of the first things I would say to them is, well, are you playing for a team or a school team, or do you belong to a football club? Because that's the first step along the road, not watching other people play football, but trying to do it yourself and setting yourself a target to practice, to attend, to participate. So career management is just about doing the things you're supposed to when you're quite young, in the hope that they will help you find out and learn about what you will be best at and what will be something you can take forward as you get into secondary school and then adulthood. So 3 things: self, world of work, and moving yourself from where you are now to maybe where you want to be. Career development is the new term for the framework. And again, some of you may be familiar with Gatsby, some of you may be familiar with the framework. Now, terminology has changed in the 20 years I've worked in the careers field, and I've put the 4 key elements down, if you like. And I also noticed I've left a blob on my presentation, which perhaps I shouldn't have done. Doesn't have any particular significance. There are 4 parts to career work or career development, in my opinion. Career education, which, like any other subject, requires some curriculum inputs. Okay, we need to learn certain things so that we can use that as a foundation. There is also career information, which obviously people can provide us with. We can find out where we can go and get it from, and it will be changing all the time. There is career advice. Now, again, advice can mean different things in different contexts, but here in the careers world, certainly when they're older, it's often about helping and empowering youngsters to use information and education to come up with answers to their own questions. It is not necessarily about saying, my advice to you is go to this school or do this subject. That is advice, and it is related to careers, but it's not the sort of careers advice we would encourage people to give. Then there is career guidance, and this is something that is unlikely to happen in primary schools at all, but is a one-to-one intervention by a professional who has specific training to help an individual. They won't always be a young person between 13 and 18, they may be an adult, but to talk them through a whole set of what is it you want, how do you think you will get there, etc. Career guidance. But recently, the government tends to lump all those 4 things under the final heading of career guidance, but there are some very specific elements within it. Now, again, we'll mention briefly here the careers and enterprise and employability. Employability skills are not necessarily, as I said earlier, academic. It's what an employer wants, and they do change sometimes, but also some of them are maintained and continued. And it is about things like being able to work independently, being able to reflect on your own performance, being able to take initiative, having interpersonal skills that mean you can work with a wide range of people, etc. And again, our education system does not necessarily do a very good job of developing employability skills within young people, but it's certainly something in primary schools you can look at. Enterprise, again, various definitions of what is enterprise and enterprising and entrepreneurial skills. If you look at the nature of employment within the country, a lot of people are working in very small businesses. There's also a lot of people working in very large public sector organisations like the NHS, or in schools, colleges, universities, though they're not quite as public sector as they used to be in some ways. But enterprise, in a way, is about being enterprising, doing the best you can, networking, availing yourself of opportunities, not waiting for things to happen, but being proactive rather than reactive would be part of my comment. And again, that's something you can develop with young people. So just now, having looked at the old CDI framework, we've now got a new one. Now, at the moment, there are primary learning outcomes, but they are being written. And my business partner, John Ambrose, is working with Janet College, who is well known in the careers world as the careers defender. And they are looking at writing some primary outcomes for these areas. And it's watch this space by the autumn term, I think. But these are now, instead of 3 areas, they've chosen 6 areas, but they're still quite nice, I think, and they are perhaps more inclusive and broader than the 3 that were before. So the first one is growing throughout life, which is the youngsters obviously are growing as they go through school, but it doesn't stop at 16, it doesn't stop at 18. I don't know how old you are who are listening to me, but we all continue hopefully to grow. It might be through training, it might be through experience, it might be through whatever. So that's the first area, if you like, which is still looking at self. There's also the exploring possibilities. So what is there out there that I could do? And that is where particularly youngsters of primary age seem to be very enthusiastic. They are not hampered perhaps by the hormones and restraints of their peers that I sometimes see when I'm dealing with secondary education. And they are open to looking at all the different sorts of things that there might be out there they could have a go at. So what are the possibilities? The sky is the limit. You've also then got creating opportunities, and that's what I mean in a way about being proactive, so that you don't just wait for something to happen, but you make suggestions, you bring forward opportunities. Then there's the bit about managing career, which, if you like, is also what I said. You know, how do we get where we want to go? What are the targets? What are the steps? It's a journey. And again, we in careers are always very keen to say it's quite important to enjoy that journey, because the destination isn't all the be all and end all, and sometimes it changes, and it's important to be enjoying the journey to wherever you think you might need to be or want to be. Now, the final 2 are interesting in that I think they bring in extra elements, but they are good extra elements. And again, balancing life and work. There have been things around about this for many, many a long time. I mean, I'm sure all, you know, the thing about all work and no play, that makes Jack a dull boy, all that sort of stuff. But it is about thinking, well, at particular stages in your life, you may want to work more flexibly than others, and it's about how do you balance life and work. So, and that for youngsters is also school, if you like, because for youngsters, school is their work. So how much time do they put into what goes on in their school, and how much do they put into other things, particularly if they have an interest in a particular sport or in a performance activity or in caring for people who may be family members or relatives. So, you know, how do they balance life and work from a young age up to whenever you stop working, if you ever do? And again, I think that's quite important, because there is often pressure on people to put their all in all the time. And yet we know that mental health issues get mentioned more and more often, and maybe they are caused by imbalance. And the final element there is seeing the big picture. So again, we are a small country in the world now. We don't even belong to the European Economic Community anymore. We used to have a very large British Empire. We still have a hangover from that, if that's the right word. Perhaps it's not, but there are historical elements to the empire. But what is the big picture? And it's something that we need to help young people understand more, because the global economy and things like global warming are very important for the future. So again, it's not just about what is happening on our island and with our education system. And interestingly, the pandemic has perhaps brought this to the forefront, but it's what's happening globally. And it's interesting perhaps that I haven't heard the news recently. I tend to avoid a lot of it, but certainly when I did a couple of weeks ago, India is still having huge issues with more and more people getting COVID, whereas we are now at the stage where we think we've possibly got it under control. But all these things affect career, because what is the big picture? Who's doing what for whom? Where do we all fit in? And I think that's important. So if you like, that's my introduction. Now I am going to, I've spent about half an hour on that, which is about right for what I was hoping. So I'm now going to have a look at what, if you are interested in getting involved in primary work and having recognition for it through something like Career Mark Primary, these are the 4 things that we are hoping you will look at and evidence. So, how can you put in certain things within your curriculum which will have an effect on your pupils? Then what are your processes and structures for leading, managing and delivering that? Just as you would with any other subject. Who's in charge? What's the training for people? How is it managed? Who checks it's happening? Who's delivering what to whom? And if you like, what's going on? Then standard 3 is actually what's in that curriculum. And again, that can vary depending on the nature of the learners you've got within your one school, or if you're from a trust in your 5 or 6 different schools. There may be different issues around careers that need addressing in different types of socioeconomic communities, or perhaps from different cultures and backgrounds. So what content and range does the careers curriculum in your organisation need? And this is where looking at frameworks and thinking about things and knowing your cohort is important. And of course, the last thing is also to make sure that, just with any other subject in a way, you've made sure the people who are delivering it have actually had some appropriate training and understand what it is they are trying to do. because otherwise you've got a bit of a problem on your hands, because they don't understand what it is. Maybe all they'll do is talk about jobs and forget about the bits about developing self and growing self, or working out how to sort of plan your future, even if it's only in little steps. What am I going to do today, tomorrow, next week? So staff feeling as though they're competent. So those are the 4 things. Now today, I'm going to spend a little more time looking at the first of those, and partly I'm going to ask questions, because if you could answer these questions, you are in the right place to be able to consider achieving the award. So, first part of measuring the impact is, what are your targets and objectives? So if you like, what is the team that you're going to have? And what are your aims and outcomes? You know, what is it you want the young people to learn? How do you want their knowledge to develop? And maybe their attitudes, and maybe their skills. So I would say, do you have in place, if you like, some sort of baseline assessments that says, when they come to us and I ask them to draw a picture of something, or tell me what job is or something, what will their answers be? And then how do I broaden that so that they know more and more and learn about all the sort of things that I want them to around careers? Can they tell me what they're good at? What are their strengths? Can they tell me what sort of person they are? How would they describe themselves? So again, what is it you are trying to help them to learn? So you need your team in place. That hopefully is all your staff in some ways, but you may have key players who are more involved than others. And then, as I say, what are your aims and outcomes? So what is it you are trying to help those learners who come into you maybe at 3, maybe at 7, and leave at maybe 7 or 11, and how are you hoping to help them develop in relation to understanding themselves, understanding the world of work, and raising their aspirations? Because again, that's another way. What do you think you would like to be? And it's really funny, actually, because I was reading a report from a junior school, and somebody said that a year 4 pupil had said they'd either like to be a vet or a cheerleader. Now, those are 2, in some ways, diametrically opposed potential careers. But the fact that well, I'm making an assumption there, maybe it wasn't a she. The fact that a learner knew that she could or he could become either a vet or a cheerleader shows quite a lot of knowledge. But the bit that's missing there when they're only 5, 6, 7 is, well, maybe I don't know which is going to be best, and maybe I haven't decided all the other things, but I know both those jobs sound interesting to me. So what are your SMART targets, baselines, aims and outcomes? The next thing is how you measure the impact. And that's sort of, I would say, the learner's knowledge, skills, understanding and achievement. So the when, who, what and how of the following. So if you're having some career learning going on, when did it happen? Was it in a different subject area? Was it on a special event? Was it on a trip out? Was it when a visitor came in? So when did it happen? Who was delivering, if you like? So who was it? Was the class teacher, the visitor who'd come in, somebody at the place you went to visit? Who was delivering the learning you want? And then how did they do it? Was it experiential learning? Was it by listening? Was it by doing? Was it by talking? All those sorts of things. Did it happen? So you need to monitor and check that if somebody says there's doing it, it's actually being evidenced, and you can say, yes, a career lesson or a career learning element happened today in my lesson. I have unfortunately come across secondary schools where in theory the tutors are delivering a careers programme, and there is a careers programme there, but sometimes the tutors feel they haven't got the time or the energy or the commitment, and they just sort of put it to one side and don't deliver it. That is not good practice and shouldn't happen. And you need systems to make sure you are monitoring what needs to be delivered. You obviously have made, from the previous point, some objectives and aims. And maybe at the end of an event or a term or a session or a unit or an academic year, just as you would with other subjects, did you identify the right sort of learning? So did you have the right things in place? Review the content, if you like. Is it what you wanted? Is it the right things? And then the final element, which again gets slightly more complicated, is the evaluating. And again, I could spend a lot of time telling you about evaluation and the different levels of it and the immediacy or the change of behaviour, etc. But the idea is, and you may need to keep evaluating as your learners go through the school, has it achieved what you planned and intended? For example, and I know this is very stereotypical, but if when youngsters come into a school, they for some reason assume that all nurses will be girls, by the time they're maybe in year 2 or 3, you have given them enough information, they realise that actually not all nurses are girls, that there are also boy nurses, if you like, or men who are nursing. So that would be a way of achieving something, that you have changed their perception. Again, you may have youngsters who come in and have been told they're no good at anything, or that they can't do this or they can't do that. And maybe a year or 2 or 3 later, you are able to get them to write down somehow and say, yes, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do whatever. So have you achieved what you were trying to? Have you helped them learn what's going on around them in the world of work? One of the things I sometimes find is that, every place we visit is often a place of work. And yet people don't necessarily think about it like that. They go to the shop or the theatre or the football or wherever. And what they don't think is, oh, somebody works in the shop or the theatre or the football, or, when they introduce young people to universities, it's not just a place of study, it's a place of work, and it's not just a place of work for academics. So what are all the jobs around them that they see? What jobs keep their houses going, their cars going, whatever going, provides the food in the supermarket? So it's helping them have a greater awareness. And again, that can also come down to the big picture. So monitoring, reviewing and evaluating, so you can show that what you've done has helped your young people. Content and range of the careers curriculum. So what does each year group have, if you like? And it's got to be appropriate for them and their needs. And it doesn't have to be by year group. You can do it We sometimes talk about age, not stage, or stage, not age. So what are the learning experiences? And then how do you record and assess that? And we don't necessarily want them taking exams. It can be self-assessment, it can be peer assessment, it can be evidence through all sorts of things. Again, the school report from primary I was reading today, they advertise jobs for year 6 pupils within the school. They have to apply for them, and then they can reflect on whether they get them or not and why they choose a particular job for applying for. So there's sorts of other things you can do around recording and assessing. Can they talk about themselves more when they're leaving than when they could when they arrive? In the broadest sense, how do you empower them to do things to help themselves? And how do you involve all the stakeholders? And again, this can vary, particularly depending on the types of socioeconomic background you've got. Some places, parents can be a hugely useful resource. Sometimes less so, but most parents will have something to offer. And again, it's about looking at the local community, the parents, older siblings, family members. What is there that can be shared to help them learn about jobs and things they could do and different pathways through education and learning? So content and range of your curriculum. Is it through subjects? Is it through special events, through visits, etc.? And then, as I say, your trained and competent staff. And when I talk about your staff, I think that all your staff are important. I've been and done assessments, and the site manager has been very important for the young people and helping them do recycling projects, for example, but also in helping them understand that it takes more than the teachers to run a school. You've got your office staff, support staff, you may have kitchen staff, cleaning staff. All these people can be involved to help the youngsters understand the range of roles that might be being used within the environment of their school. And if those people are all part of your training, it makes it all more of a community and can encourage people to look at what they've done in terms of their learning, and if they can aspire to move on to something else. So what do your staff need to know? What are the things you think would help them? Obviously, perhaps an introduction to a career framework, some of the things that are available. But also, if they're subject specialists, how does their subject relate to careers? And this is where I sometimes find subject specialists in secondary struggle, but primary ones don't have quite the same constraints, perhaps apart from English, math and science, about SATs and things. But, you know, what skills does a subject teach somebody? It's about transferable skills. Is it like working in a team? Is it about problem solving? Is it about research skills? Is it about learning about finance, etc., etc., so that all the subjects can in some ways contribute to being relevant to a whole range of careers, and not just ones that seem obvious, like we study history to become a historian, but we study history because it helps us look at different views of things, it helps us use research materials, it helps us understand there is more than one perspective, if you like. So just things like that can be important. And then what other local knowledge and experience have you got? Can you work with other primaries, with secondary schools, with community groups, with business groups? Your governors or boards of whatever, directors, depending on how your organisation is run, how can they help in terms of inspiring young people, inspiring your staff, helping with that knowledge of self, knowledge of pathways, knowledge of moving themselves forward to where they want to be, exploring the different types of jobs there are. I was talking to some youngsters not long ago and they said to me, oh, there's a factory down the road. People work there. I said, okay, that's good, yes. Have you any idea what jobs are in that factory? And unfortunately, they hadn't. I didn't know the sort of factory it was, but I thought, well, is it just a factory where there's production line, or does it have an HR department? Does it have an accounts department? Are there managers? Does it have a logistics department, etc.? So again, all these things, local knowledge and experience, what is it and how does it work in your area? So in a way, that's me finished talking. A few minutes left. There is another webinar in a fortnight, and we're going to look at the other elements and find out more, but I'm going to turn myself into a photograph, and if anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask them now. And I hope that's been a useful introduction and may inspire you to take it further with your school or organisation. So thank you for coming anyway, and any questions?